the events taking place right now are so extraordinary. I'm going to have to try and do a series of messages to hash out all this content to try to show you guys how amazing these times are. We're going to talk about the 70 nations. And guys, you can see I have my 70 nations shirt on. I went to the conference. Some of the things I'm going to tell you are unique because you have to go to some of these places. You have to see it for yourself with your own eyes. And that's the type of message I'm going to convey to you, because very few people on YouTube and other people have been able to attend these conferences and then report back and what they saw. So one thing I want to say as I wear this shirt and people get offended, let's remember that Moses, when he had the opportunity to enter the promised land, what did he do? He sent those before him. Okay, so I was sent before to go and into the land and to see some of the things that we're talking about. Now, I went to the conference. It was a few days, and it was a little less than a year ago, and I couldn't really last throughout all of it. Basically, I went through the first half of the day session. They sacrificed the animal. I got sick. I couldn't continue that day or the next day, and I kind of finished. So I didn't get the opportunity to share more detail on all the different speakers and everything else. But I do have another video where I do share some of the speakers, some of what we could see. And I didn't realize at the time how big it was. In fact, I didn't realize how big it was until UAE made this arrangement, this Abrahamic Accord with Israel. I was like, this is bigger than, and I have to try and convey this to the people somehow. Now, let's do a little history. The whole idea and concept of 70 nations and all this is a principle. It's a governmental order of the kingdom of heaven. So the children of Israel, when they encamped with Moses, Moses said, it's too much. I need help. God said, okay, separate 70 elders, and I'll pour my spirit on you, Moses, on them, and they will help bear the burden. Okay? And it's in other places too. It was 70 the children of Israel that went into Egypt with Jacob. It's a principle of 70. Okay? And the principle of 70 also goes back to the to Genesis chapter 10. In Genesis chapter 10, we have Noah. He passes through. He has 3 sons, and from his 3 sons have 70 nations, or 70 sons, essentially. Okay, and those are all listed in Genesis chapter 10. All right, so that's the basic principle. And it also says in Deuteronomy 32, verse 7 and 9, that God would divide the nations in their inheritance according to the tribes of the children of Israel. So that is the principle of what's taking place with the 70 nations. But I want you to understand from church history, guys, what we're witnessing is something you would probably only understand unless it was happening. Okay, because it is in the scripture, it's in there, it's coded. We're going to go through more of this to show it all to you, okay? Because when I say, okay, the Antichrist is going to rule the world from Jerusalem, it's like, where's that? Okay, well, it's there, okay? It's just, we have to go through this whole idea. Let's talk about it simply. All right, what we just talked about. So we had Genesis chapter 10, and then of course, what you have is one of the sons, Cush, has Nimrod, right? And what does Nimrod do? He builds a tower. Okay, so what is it that they're doing? Okay, the 70 nations. You can see on this, you can see the circle going around is 2 rows, 35 each, 70. And you had 70 nations, and then you have Genesis 11, and you have Nimrod building the tower. Okay? And then you have the nations split up in different languages and everything, right? So for us and believers in Jesus Christ, we don't follow these 70 nations. We don't follow this Judaism and this concept because we know they're also combining that with the Noahide laws, okay? So simply put, I'm wearing the shirt to show you I've been on the inside in the conference, okay? I'm not in support of these ideas. I'm giving you testimony of Jesus Christ, okay? And that being said, guys, the idea of the 70 nations was not known throughout church history, because in 70 AD, the temple is destroyed and there's no Jewish nation, okay? People thought, okay, maybe they come back, but once Israel was regathered and they became a nation in 1948, okay, what took place, guys, was constant war. And the Most High protected them. 1948, 1949, 1967, miraculous wars, even angels participating in wars to keep them established as a nation, okay? Because they must, the nation of Israel must exist in the last days in order for there to be a temple, okay? So, but they, of course, obviously they haven't accepted Christ, so when we see them doing these 70 nations and they're looking for a guy to build a temple and it's not Jesus Christ, it's Nimrod and it's the Tower of Babel. Okay, simply put, I'm wearing the shirt, but I'm making my message clear to you, okay? So that's what we believe is taking place prophetically, okay? And when you go to the conferences, of course, there's sacrificing of animals, and it's very shocking, okay? But it is Bible prophecy. But nobody could have believed that the surrounding Arab nations would join in peace agreements individually with Israel. No one would have believed that 5 years ago, okay? Never mind the whole time in church history that Israel's reformed as a nation, they're in constant war, okay? It's the Psalm 83 war. The surrounding nations all fight them, okay? So that's Psalm 83. So that's extraordinary, okay? Now, of the fighting that took place, the border nations made peace agreements. So Israel fought with Egypt, and they made a peace agreement in 1979. When the Sinai Peninsula was given back to Egypt, they made a peace accord, okay? As well, in 1994, there was a peace accord with Jordan, okay? And there's 2 peace agreements, all right? So now there's 2 peace agreements, okay. But still, there's propaganda and disputing and all kinds of things, Arabs against Jews. I mean, it's the whole Middle East story, right? Well, who would have thought they would start making peace? Guys, it's extraordinary. It's got to be supernatural. It's got to be the beast building the 3rd temple, okay? So now, of all this time we've known the state of Israel, we never could have believed these nations made a peace agreement with Israel, and they did something in Khartoum, which is in Sudan. Biblically, it's also Ethiopia. What happened? There they had the 3 no's to not have agreements with Israel, and they all decided, all the Arab nations, the Muslim nations, decided they would refuse to make agreements with Israel. Happened in Sudan. Now, they got upset with Egypt because Egypt made an agreement with them. But anyway, that kind of agreement was an understood agreement throughout all the Arab nations, okay, that you would never make a peace accord and a peace agreement with Israel because of what they're doing to the Palestinians and all that, right? So guys, it's possible that the different nations that are going to make the agreement, it's possible Sudan is one of them. If it is, that is reversing that old agreement, okay? And now they can have many of these other, nations be part of this. But what is going on? How can we make sense of this? What is prophetically going on? Guys, it is the 70 nations, okay? Many of you saw the conference, saw the things, and you're just like, Leland, what's the big deal? It's a bunch of rabbis in a small conference room. Yeah, that's just the front door. I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg, guys. Donald Trump is meeting with rabbis, okay, and they're telling him what to do. They know about these concepts, and so, yeah, in Israel and Jerusalem, okay, they sacrifice an animal, they do these conferences, and it's like they get a handful of people. It's like, but prophetically what's going on, the influence is going way into the White House, way into it, where they're telling Trump what to do. They're telling the Antichrist what to do, okay? That's how powerful Zionism is. That's what's really going on, okay? So the 70 nations concept is held in the highest rabbinical order and influencing of the White House. That's what we're saying. And do they need 70 Arab? I mean, there's, but keep in mind, when Noah and his 3 sons, after the flood, this was the whole world. The whole world was stemmed from Noah, his 3 sons, and these 70 descendants. It was the whole world, okay? So even though it's only 70 nations, it's not 70 modern nations. That's ridiculous. But the whole world. And so this rabbinic council, these concepts that's in this 70 nations that's going on is real. And not only that, they're subduing the Arab nations, okay? And they're doing this to build the temple. Now all these Arab nations, they have prophecies in the Quran about, Dajjal and, even Jesus and, different things, okay? So they know about all this, but they're doing it anyway. They know about a third temple, they're doing it anyway, because the Jews believe the 70 nations, the Goyim, which is the nations, have to build their temple. Okay, so I want you to understand how extraordinary this is, okay, because it never was known throughout church history. We've never known what it was like when Israel was reestablished as a nation. Then once Israel's reestablished as a nation, it was never believed that surrounding Arab nations would make peace accords. Now, they also do this according to the prophecy in Daniel 8, where you have the goat coming from the west. So the goat coming from the west is the United States going to the Middle East. So the Middle East has been divided up for Armageddon. What is it? Okay. What is taking place is heading to Armageddon. Everything is being separated. So what you have is you have Sunni and Shiite Muslims. Okay. So you got the Sunnis with Saudi Arabia and some of the Gulf and Bahrain and etc. against the Shiites and Iran. Okay, so Iran is going to be on one side, and it appears Turkey's part of that, and Russia. Okay, and the kings of the East. Okay, so possibly China as well would be this eastern side of this war, and the West will be all the other nations. So what's happening is these other nations are siding with Israel, are siding with the United States, siding with the West. Okay, and that's what's just so crazy. So there's no mistake, guys, of what is going on. Why is Mike Pompeo in Jerusalem? Okay, why did he go to that synagogue? I'm showing you all this stuff to hopefully get you to understand what's going on, because there are peace agreements in Daniel chapter 11, which is the Antichrist. He says he makes a league, okay, and he also talks about 3 nations there. He talks about Egypt. He talks about Ethiopia. He talks about Libya, okay. So Egypt, they already have agreements, but they may come out and say something else. Ethiopia is Sudan, okay. So Sudan, if they say something, this is very big. Okay, so what's taking place is the reason they call it, we'll show you a map, but the reason they call it the Abraham Accords is it's going from the Euphrates, it's going up to Syria, and then it's going to Egypt, and then it's covering the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. All right, so basically all of that area, all of that territory are going to be subdued Arab nations serving Israel to build a third temple. I mean, this is just crazy, guys. But that is what's going on, and I want to show you and graphically express this as well, because you guys tell me how much you like the props and everything else, to let you know that this prophecy is real, but it's not easy to understand. Okay, you have to go through the details of the prophecy. You have to understand what's going on. Why is it 70? Okay. Why are there numbers 24? Okay. What do these numbers mean? Okay. So let's mention it real quick while we're at it. So you can see the pattern of 70, and there are 70 seats in that synagogue in a circular fashion like this. Then there's another section of 24 seats, and they're squared off and they're in the back. Well, the Sanhedrin technically has an upper Sanhedrin and a lower Sanhedrin. It's got one that's 70 and one that's 24. Okay? And we can see that in Ezekiel chapter 8. In Ezekiel chapter 8, it talks about the elders of Israel, the 70. Okay? And then it talks about 24 that turn their backs to the temple and worship the sun. All right? Well, those 24 are the drunk nations. There's drunk nations in Jeremiah. So what's taking place is the kings of the earth, the drunk nations, the merchants of the earth that we read about in Revelation 17 and 18, okay, they're assembling. They are coming, bringing gifts to the Antichrist for the third temple. All right, guys, here's our 70 Nations Founding Conference brochure. You can see September 2019, we were there, and you can see the seats going around, 70 seats, and we're going to explain what this is. But if we go through and we look, we have Isaiah 11 quoted first, and here are the principles of the 70 Nations. 70 Nations organization is directed to all mankind to accept God as a creator, to recognize his leadership as he appears in the annals of the world and the universe, and basically all beings in history and language and nations for creating, destroying, and the reward and punishment, just as God reveals himself in the Bible and declares his laws and precepts. And the purpose of man in history is to serve him through the medium of the temple, as he wills through the power of his holiness comes from Mount Zion. All humanity and all peoples, both individually and multifaceted groups, are descendants of Adam and Eve. Okay, and the flood, all right, and the basic breaches of God's laws are the following: revolt against God, lack of justice, forbidden sexual relations, murder, stealing, robbery, worshiping a false god, inflicting damage and through illegal and unbridled greed. Okay, these breaches in a positive tone are expressed in a covenant of the Noahides. So basically what this means is that the Goyim cannot manage themselves, so they need to be managed by Jews. And the Jews were given the 10 Commandments, but the Goyim were given 7 Noahide laws. So the nations have to agree to the 7 Noahide laws. The 70 Nations organization envisions the redemption and the rehabilitation of man and the whole world in respects to honor of mankind and family and country and state, etc., equal to all manner according to the laws of the Bible, and internal justice based on the Bible. So, of course, they say the Bible, but really they don't really make a distinction between rabbis and the Bible. We say no, the Bible. They say no, they're all the Torah. Okay, so this organization will concern itself with the protection of the globe. And let's go to the essence of the organization is a international court will sit in Jerusalem and judge according to the important and recognized laws of the Bible as adjusted in the facts of life. All members and organizations, states, nations, ethnic groups, tribes will have a seat, equaling voting powers in the court of law, as long as the accompanying people of Israeli, as it appears in the covenant composed by the Sanhedrin 28, signed by the number of the countries. So you sign the covenant and you get a seat. The 70 nations and the nations are signed. The original covenant mentioned above will compose of a court, and decisions will be decided upon a majority vote. The role of the Sanhedrin will be to consult and advise by the Sanhedrin and cannot force its opinion upon the court, and it will have one seat and one vote in the court. All decisions will be made according to the vote, according to the numbers. So they're saying here the Sanhedrin only has one
one court. But let's remember, guys, this is the same Sanhedrin that killed Jesus Christ. So that's what these 7 Noahide laws is leading to. They call him blasphemy. If more than 70 bodies, okay, so they have more than that. Here's more on the principles. And basically, these are the principles of the Noahide laws and the judgment being carried out. So, just to summarize here a little bit what's going on, guys, is Donald Trump's covenant, his peace deal, when he made the peace deal, the peace covenant, what's going on here is that peace covenant is the Noahide laws. Many of you have observed that through the years, many U.S. presidents have acknowledged the Noahide laws. Well, those have passed until the Antichrist would do the peace deal. So that covenant and that peace deal is that covenant with many, as it says in Daniel 9:27. And that's what we're seeing, is this covenant taking place, and that covenant does include the Noahide laws. It includes the 70 nations to rule and to replace the United Nations, okay? And so there's a lot here in Hebrew. I can kind of take photos of this if you guys are interested. A few things I just want to show you. Some of the previous coins. This is a coin of David. This is the one we've shown you here. Donald Trump. The World Creation Day. Okay, and the all-important Nikki Haley. So at the time of the conference, the coin of the year was Nikki Haley. And you can see on the coin, if we look closely, we can see the first 2 flags is Israel and the United States. And this is a coin, a commemorative coin, but it's basically Israel replacing the United Nations. You see this here is the United Nations with the flags, but Israel is first, United States is second. And the 70 nations would then replace the United Nations. They've been very clear about that, okay? So that's the replacement of United Nations on one side, and the altar and the shekel of the sanctuary on the other side, okay? This was the concert, and here is the 70 nations scroll, okay? I'm not going to read this whole thing. If you're interested, I will give you links for all this and give you copies of this, okay? But the thing that really got my attention was when the UAE signed this agreement and made this Abrahamic covenant. I found it in here, okay? And there was a call to the Arab nations. So this is it in English, and the call to the Arab nations also in Arabic. But this is what I began to realize what's going on, is the call came from the 70 nations. Dear brothers and distinguished sons of Ishmael, the great Arab nation. Now, of course, as we look, we'll see really Ishmael is just a small percentage, but the tribes aren't known through the Muslim religion. A lot of the ancestry and knowledge was gone. But this is the cry to Ishmael. Now, that's important because they're making sure that they know that they're Ishmael and Jacob is the son of the promise. With the gracious help of the protector and savior of Israel, creator of the world, by the covenant we declare that the footsteps of the Messiah are evident, and heard that the time has come to rebuild the temple on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem in its ancient place. We, the Jews who advocate building the temple, are applying your honorable ones who were nominated by their peoples to give an oath and raise vows and give gifts to the temple. Now, this is very significant because these giving of gifts to the temple, guys, all of this here is in the book of Revelation, okay? I just have to take the time to show you it's all in this writing, and then I'll show you where it is in Revelation later. Okay, concerning your essential role and honorable position in keeping the temple and supporting it with the lamb, sacrifices, and incense in order to receive God's blessings. By virtue of this, we are certain that you will choose peaceful means to avoid passive hostility and violence, and we are sure together that we will open the doors of love and respect. Signed by the members of the great Jewish biblical court, the Sanhedrin, from the chamber of the Temple Mount. And they list some rabbis here. So then they quote Isaiah chapter 60. So then I began to realize that this call is going specifically to the Arab nations that are signing peace accords with Israel. This is the 70 nations, guys. That's what's going on with UAE and then whoever comes next. Now, how does this relate to the book of Revelation? The book of Revelation, chapter 18, we're calling it the harlot's merchandise, and it gives an inventory of all the things in Revelation 18 that the merchants have, okay? And you can see the whole list here. Well, what we found is that in Solomon's temple, all the same things are listed. So what it's talking about in Revelation 18 is the building of the third temple, okay? So once you clearly see that this is no coincidence, all the same things are there. Now, who does this is something called the merchants. And the merchants are listed in Ezekiel chapter 27. And they list all the same things for the third temple as you see in Revelation and in Solomon, as you can see, if you just keep looking down here, okay? So what that means is that the book of Revelation lists these merchants, okay? And what are they doing? They are the nations giving offerings to the third temple, okay? So this is Ezekiel 27, and it lists the actual locations of them. Okay, so there you can see all the locations, and there's a total of 39. And there are drunk nations, which you can see in Jeremiah 25. That's in red, okay? So there's 24 of those, there's 39 merchants, and there's 7 mountains. That gives us a total of 70. Herein lies the mystery of the 70 nations. It includes drunk nations. It includes the merchants. Okay, 24 drunk nations, 39 merchants, and 7 mountains. Okay, so the 7 mountains in Revelation, the woman sits on 7 mountains. And these 7 mountains are listed in Ezekiel 32. Okay, so everything we're seeing in the book of Revelation is taking place right before our eyes. So what exactly is this? What is this? And we see the title here, and I encourage you to get these notes. What is the court of the 70 nations? Well, we see this court has, of course, 70 seats. And Ezekiel 8 says, Then stood up 70 men of the ancients of the house of Israel, and Jezaniah, and everyone with his censer in his hand. So they were the ones that were like revolting against Moses and Korah. Okay, and then there was about 25 men with their backs towards the temple and their faces towards the east, worshiping the sun. So keep in mind, there are 24 drunk nations listed in Jeremiah 25. What's the first one? Jerusalem. Okay, so it's Jerusalem that is the center of all this. Jerusalem is the center of where this council is going to rule the whole world. Okay? So that's who the 70 men are, the ancients of the house of Israel, is talking about in Ezekiel. This is the actual place. We've shown it to you by the western wall. Okay, it's an actual building, and it says there it's part of the third temple. Now, we're just reading what the book of Revelation says. Revelation 2:9 and 3:9 says that I know the blasphemy of them that say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. So that's what we're saying. This council, all this stuff, the 70 nations, is the synagogue of Satan, okay? But they do lie, all right? And now we see in Revelation 18, the nations have been drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have gotten rich, and the merchants were the great men of the earth, and by the sorceries, pharmakia, were all the nations deceived, okay? So these are the nations, the kings of the earth, okay, are now coming together to build a third temple, coming together under this council. The kings of the east are prepared. The Euphrates is dried, okay? So this is leading to Armageddon. The kings of the earth and of the whole world gather together them unto the battle of the great day of God Almighty. So in Jeremiah 25, okay, when it talks about the nations drunk with the wine, it's leading to Armageddon. Jeremiah 25:15, take the wine cup of his fury in your hand and cause the nations where I send you to drink it. They shall drink it and be moved and be mad. Jerusalem and the cities of Judah and the kings and the princes, okay? Then later on it describes Armageddon. Where is this drunkenness coming from? Jerusalem. Now, the merchants we find in Ezekiel 27. Ezekiel 27 lists the 39 merchant nations, okay? But they're led by the prince of Tyre. Ezekiel 28:2, the prince of Tyre will sit in the seat of God, and he is over the merchants. And what do? Is they bring the offerings for the third temple. That's what we showed you. It's listed in Revelation 18. So where is the seat of God? It's in Jerusalem. It's in the temple. So what happens is the Antichrist makes a league. A league shall be made with them, and he shall enter peaceably. Peace and prosperity. This is the peace deal, okay? And he will have power over the treasuries of gold, of silver, of precious things. This is everything going into the third temple. Okay? And those are specific countries listed. Egypt, Libya, Ethiopia, or Sudan. That's what we're saying. These things are happening, guys. In verse 45, he will plant his palace. Okay? Where we will have the seat of God. He will plant his palace between the seas in the glorious high mountain, Jerusalem. So, guys, the Antichrist rules the world from Jerusalem. Okay? I hope you understand it. I know it's a lot of information. Let's just kind of go over a little bit more with this, guys. I really encourage you to get into the playlist, Mystery Babylon, and to really understand what's going on with the 70 nations. Quick recap. So the 70 nations come from the three sons of Noah, and here you can see where the 70 nations and the geographical area of where the three sons spread out after the flood. Okay, so these are the 70 nations, the 70 sons from Japheth, Shem, and Ham. Okay, and this area is also the area promised to Abraham. Here you see Abraham's route from Ur up to Haram over to Egypt and going up the Euphrates River. He was promised from the Nile to the Euphrates. Okay, that's why the peace accords are going to be called the Abraham Accords. Okay, because this is God's promise to Abraham, and it includes the Saudi Arabian Peninsula heading to the south. Okay, so that's where we can see UAE, and we'll see Bahrain and some others here. Okay, so this is unbelievable. Look at the flags of the nations. Doesn't it look like the horse riders of Revelation? Okay, but they're bowing to little Israel. You can hardly see it on the map there. But these are the 70 nations. This is their council. This is the court of the 70 nations ruling the earth. There are 24 drunken nations that we have shown you. This is Bible prophecy. The book of Revelation is coming to life. Okay, the 70 nations, the synagogue of Satan, the actual place, okay, where these council will meet. This is the same council, the Sanhedrin that killed Jesus Christ, okay? And they are instituting the Noahide laws in these last days to replace the United Nations. This is replacing the United Nations, and these nations are drunk and bowing to Israel, to the United States. It's astonishing. But the scriptures must be fulfilled. It's just a matter of understanding and deciphering. What do these things mean? Why does that altar, where they dedicated the altar, there is going to be a third temple of some sort. They're saying it has to be on the Temple Mount. This is their Mashiach, okay? And they're charging him to build a house. They have to have the court of the 70 nations. You see the 70 seats going around in a circle, the third temple. This is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.